Hi everyone, my name is Lucia Wang, and today we're going to talk about the number one reason why a relationship becomes toxic. This is a very popular question that I often hear, and it does need to be answered because a lot of people out there are confused and they're wondering how can relationships start out so wonderful, right? And then months and years later, it's not wonderful and it becomes toxic to the point that a lot of us don't even know why we're in the relationship and how we got there, right? Um, so let's talk about it. And the term that I came up with is laziness craziness. Laziness craziness is what I believe is the number one reason why a relationship becomes toxic and eventually fails if we're not careful. What is laziness craziness? It's a cute, catchy term I made up that accurately describes the process of what happens when a relationship becomes toxic and fails. Laziness craziness is the gradual change in a relationship when partners start taking each other for granted by becoming lazy in their efforts to show up as the best version of themselves. Let me say that again. Laziness craziness is the gradual change in a relationship when partners start taking each other for granted by becoming lazy in the efforts to show up as the best version of themselves. Um, that I when I think about it, and when people ask that question, that's what it really is. We just always, for some reason, we just get lazy. We don't pay attention. If you think back when you first met each other, right? When you first dated, the whole attention was on each other. We were very attentive to each other. We paid attention to everything that was said. And so gradually, especially after a commitment is made or after marriage, for some reason, both partners, one or both partners, just start to take each other for granted. They just forget that they forget all the good things and the reason why we fell in love or why we end up marrying or being committed to someone because we really like them, right? In my last video, I did talk about that, about what is real love. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go and take a look at that video. What is what is real love? Because the last video actually talks about how, I mentioned how if you think of the air we breathe, right? If when we take that for granted, most of us, right? As long as we can breathe, then life's good. But if something else to happen and we wouldn't be able to breathe anymore, then at that moment we realize just how important air is. I compare that to how all of us end up with viewing a relationship, how this laziness, craziness, how that happens. Is because I often think, we all forget. We all take each other for granted, and next thing you know, it's not until the relationship is in trouble or we lose the relationship or the relationship somehow ends that now we realize what we've lost. And so that does explain to me why that happens. And as that laziness perpetuates long enough in a relationship, it gradually turns into craziness in a relationship. Folks, as human beings, we all tend to be selfish at times. We were all born alone in this world and we will die alone. So we all have the survival instinct of self-preservation. But we need to be mindful of this selfish tendency because if we're not careful, we can lose sight of being intentional in our relationships and become lazy in our efforts to show up as our best self to our partners. Then if we don't make the intentional effort of being the best that we can be, our relationships will ultimately suffer and become crazy. So let me say that again. We need to be mindful of the selfish tendency because if we're not careful, we can lose sight of being intentional in our relationships and become lazy in our efforts to show up as our best self to our partners. Then if we don't make the intentional effort of being the best we can be, our relationships will ultimately suffer and become crazy. So here are the 4 things to do to avoid laziness craziness, because that would be the next question. Okay, if we're saying lazy craziness is what causes it, it's the number reason why the relationship becomes toxic, then it's very important that we all need to understand how we can avoid this lazy craziness from happening. So there are 4 things, excuse me, I'd like to talk about, and something we need to keep in mind. Number 1, we need to be intentional in your commitment to your partner. by intentionally putting your best foot forward to show up as the best version of yourself to your partner. Love is an action that begins with a conscious decision to be your best every day for your partner. So I want to stop right here because I also hear, I also see questions that come through like, well, my partner says he loves me, but but I don't feel it, or he's not showing it. Well, this is why. Okay, it's not good enough for someone just to verbalize, to say I love you. Actions, as we all know, speaks louder than words, much louder. So, in this number one thing is to be intentional. It means that we need to intentionally put our best foot forward every day for our partners. Words are nice, but it's not going to be enough, because what means more to all of us is how people express and show their love to us, right? Um, like making your bed every morning when you wake up, whether you're in the mood or not. The same attitude needs to be applied to your relationship. Okay, in my previous book that I wrote, Fairy Tales Are for Frogs, The Reality of Happily Ever After, and this is my most recent book. If you haven't gotten it yet, I recommend it for anyone who's in a long-term relationship or anyone that's been married for a long time. This book will help you understand how to find happiness within yourself, and how, and that involves what we're talking about here is relationships. And in this book, I did mention about the attitude of making the bed every morning. How I use that as an example to be somewhat of the attitude that I feel we all should take when we wake up every morning, and how we deal with our partners. Okay, so if you haven't gotten the book, please check into it. You can find it on my link section of my YouTube channel. It'll have all the links to all the books I've ever written. So, Fairy Tales Are for Frogs. So when you get a chance, take a look at that. A successful, happy relationship just doesn't happen automatically after two people decide to move in together or get married. Just like the daily nurturing of a plant growing, daily work is required to build a successful relationship. So being aware and cognizant of your attitude, of how you show up, is very important. Okay, number 2, be polite or courteous. What we need to avoid, so the second thing to avoid is that we need to be polite and courteous. Simple, kind words like please, thank you, ask instead of demanding, by prefacing each request with will you. When you ask a question, say it, put a will you in front of it, so it sounds like a question, not a demand. Instead of demanding, go this, or I need to get that, right? Just put, it says so much nicer and courteous when you say please. Please, will you get this? Please, I need you to, or please, will you, right? So this is just some small things to keep in mind. And that will go a long way to avoid the laziness, craziness, if we just continually keep in mind how we approach our partners, to be polite and courteous. Okay, number 3, be a teammate and want to be the captain of the team instead. Okay, so where the relationship is not on equal footing. So we also need to be, careful that to avoid being lazy and crazy, is we always remember our partner is our teammate. They are an equal. Not as, so when I say teammate, you think of a team, right? You have your teammates, and then you have the captain. Well, often when a relationship starts to get lazy, one or both partners start viewing each other as not teammates, but rather as one person feels like they're the captain of the other person, that they're more superior, and that's not a good thing. The equality and respect in relationship is lost. There is a sense of one partner feeling more superior to their partner and treating them disrespectfully as such. The two no longer operate as a team of equals, but rather a union of unequals, where one or both feel more superior in the relationship. When this happens, the two partners will be in frequent struggles instead of working towards a common solution or compromise. And so, as you know, for all of you who've been in long-term relationships, and you might have experienced this, I know I have, this can easily happen. I don't know what happens when we first meet somebody, we fall in love, and then we grow to love the person for who they are, and then we decide to commit ourselves or get married. Um, I don't know what happens afterwards. Somehow we all take each other for granted, and at some point we just lose that sense of respect for each other, and we start feeling like we're more superior than the other person. And that is like the root of all our power struggles that we have. If you're having power struggles with your partner, this is why. Instead of you two viewing each other as equals, excuse me, I just dropped my piece of paper. Let me go get that. Instead of viewing each other as your equals, now you're viewing each other as your adversaries, your opponent that you have to fight, and you got to fight, and someone's got to win. So it's not a healthy mindset or a way of treating your partner or approaching them. And so usually when this happens, in the beginning, when you first met the person, you were more open to the other person's ideas and their thinking and considering their thinking, and again coming up with a compromise that works for both of you. Well, now when you get to this mindset where you think you're above somebody or superior to somebody, that option is not in your mind. You just want to win. You just want to prove to that person that you're right, they're wrong, right? There's no more about, oh, well, I value your opinion and let me think about it. Let's see if we can work out a solution that works for the best for the both of us. So that's something to keep in mind, is to be a teammate instead of a captain of a team. The fourth thing is make each other the highest priority in a relationship, meaning we don't value the relationship enough to resolve conflicts, spend time, and do fun things together. Don't laugh together anymore. And these are just a few examples. So this fourth one is part of what happens when you start getting lazy, is that you stop making each other your highest priority. Other things become more important, whether it's sports, friends, exercise. It could be things or people, but all of a sudden, it could be even your own children, right? But the bottom line is that you start not putting each other as your highest priority. And there are other ways we don't put ourselves as the highest priority. We start putting people and things above each other. People meaning the others outside of a relationship, like our family members and friends, which I just said before. And things, we could put things above each other, meaning hobbies, sports, addictions, substance abuse like drugs or alcohol, or less obvious addictions like work or being a workaholic. So yeah, these are all things that people at some point, if you get lazy and you no longer, being intentional, as we said earlier, and you're not being polite and you're not treating each other as teammates, then the respect is gone. And now instead of trying to work with each other, you're trying to avoid each other. And when you do that, you don't make each other a high priority. You start to find distractions outside of a relationship just to not have to face whatever problems that need to be resolved. And usually people either turn to people or things or both as a way to distract themselves. So let me just say this again. There are other ways we don't put ourselves as the highest priority. We start putting people and things above each other. People meaning others outside a relationship, like family members and friends. Things meaning hobbies, sports, addictions, substance abuse like drugs and alcohol, or less obvious addictions like work and being a workaholic. I believe we often behave this way when we don't want to address the issues in our relationship and use other people or things as a temporary escape or major distraction to avoid dealing with our relationship problems. And this is ultimately counterproductive because the problems are still there and they're just temporarily swept underneath the carpet, so to speak. And by avoiding one another, turning to addictions, or turning to other people outside the relationship will only add to the already existing problems within a relationship. So if we truly value our relationship, we need to make our partner our number one highest priority. And folks, we see this all the time, right? Don't we hear about it? People have an affair, people start an affair at work, or they get emotional, or they have an emotional affair, which is the same thing. It's not, doesn't have to have a physical affair for it to be considered a major problem with being loyal, but you could also have an emotional affair, which is also a sign of not being loyal and faithful to your partner. But all these things can happen all as the result of not making your partner your number one priority. Now, I understand there's certain times in your relationship, or there's certain times in life that you have to make children or family members, a higher priority for the moment. If there's a family emergency or if your children get sick, that's taken into consideration. Of course, there's going to be times where they are going to have to be a higher priority, but what I'm talking about is the majority of the time, not for those special instances that happen in life where everyone knows that at certain times of a relationship you do put others, there are times that does justify um, putting other people above the relationship. Um, but what we're talking about here is just everyday life. That in time you'll just see the pattern where people are not really valuing each other anymore, and they're not putting each other as first priority. So those are the four things. And uh, toxicity in relationships just doesn't happen overnight. So, like I said, these things that I just pointed out, it's a gradual process. It's a gradual change, like a frog in boiling water, where the partners don't realize the relationship is deteriorating as the laziness, craziness behaviors slowly erode the relationship to the point of toxicity. Okay, I don't know if you guys have heard of that analogy. I mean, it's kind of a gruesome analogy about a boiling frog. I didn't learn about that till a few years ago. Um, but for those of you who don't understand what that boiling frog is, it's not a very pretty picture. But basically, it's about, and I don't know if this is true. Obviously, maybe someone did an experiment, so they've actually know for a fact this actually happened. But the idea is that if you put a frog in boiling water, well, you put a frog in a pot of water that's not hot yet, and you turn the fire on, right? As the water gets hotter, the frog adjusts to the water. It doesn't even realize that they're being boiled, right? And it's not until and they don't, and during this time the frog could probably jump out of the pot, right? But it's comfortable. It tries to accommodate the change in temperature, and as the water gets hotter and hotter, to the point when it gets to the point to a boiling, it's too late. At that point, there's been so much damage done to the frog, it just dies. So that's a little bit more of a dramatic example, I guess. That I don't really want to, us to focus on the end result of that example. But the point is well taken. That similarly, if we're not careful to be vigilant over how we show up for our partners, and we let the laziness start taking root in our relationship, it eventually becomes craziness. And you guys know what that means, right? You're not nice to each other anymore. Just rude behavior, disrespectful. There could even be verbal abuse. There's just a host of things that will end up to the outside looking like it's crazy, right? And a lot of people think, a lot of people don't realize that it didn't happen like this. It wasn't always like this, and it certainly didn't happen like this overnight. It's a gradual process. So by the time the rest of us hear about a friend who's having problems with a relationship, and your friend's describing to you all this craziness, we're thinking this guy's a monster, or whoever they're with is a monster. But oftentimes, it's what we got to keep in mind is that it's a process that it became that way. If the person was that way to begin with, I highly doubt the person would have made a commitment or married the person, right? So I mean, in most situations, there's probably exceptions to the rule, all right? But I'm just saying about in most normal situations, when people get married, it's under the assumption that both parties are happy, they're in love, they're committed to spend the rest of their lives with each other, they accept each other for who they are. So it's under those kind of conditions. So how do we get from there to here? It's a gradual process that's happened. Um, So, in summary, to prevent a relationship from becoming toxic and failing, we need to be vigilant and proactive to avoid laziness, craziness by doing these four things. We need to be intentional. Number one, to be intentional in our commitment to our partner by making the conscious effort to always put our best foot forward so we can show up as the best selves for our partners. Number two, being polite and courteous. Number three, being a teammate by treating each other with equality and respect. Number four, making each other the highest priority. So, folks, a lot of this it sounds very simplified, and all understand what these are, but it's easy to say these things, and we all know when you actually put it into practice, it's very difficult. Okay, especially when one or both partners have already taken each other for granted. Usually, when that happens, hostilities and resentment starts to escalate. And it's very difficult to kind of take a step back and realize what we can do at this point to maybe positively change the direction of the relationship so that it doesn't get to the point where it's gradually getting worse to the point of craziness. And just for good news, and just to let you guys know, if a relationship does get to that point, because I hear that question a lot too, what do we do? I feel our relationship is toxic. What should I do? Well, these 4 steps would be a start. Even if your partner isn't aware of these 4 things, you can put these into practice. You can start being intentional every morning, right? You can start putting your best self showing up as your best self to your partner. You can be polite and courteous. You can be a teammate, treat them as an equal and not disrespectful, and make each other and make him the highest, make your partner the highest, make the relationship the highest priority. If you haven't been doing that, trust me, your partner will take note and will be kind of shocked and wondering what's going on here. All this time you've been putting others before me or things before me, and now all of a sudden, what's this change all about? And how you'll know is when you make this change, your partner will be shocked. They will, and they may even approach you and say, "What's going on with you?" And you'll say, "What do you mean?" Right? Like you didn't know. And your partner will say, "Well, I noticed that you normally act like this, and I'm surprised that you didn't act like that in your, or, I'll give an example. If you normally don't put your, let's say your boyfriend or your husband as a high priority, or you started putting other people above them, right? You might have a girlfriend that you call all the time and you hang on the phone with them all the time and you don't really make any time for your husband or your boyfriend. If you start making the change and start paying more attention to your husband or boyfriend and not hang on the phone as much, he will take notice of that. And he may not trust you or believe that you've made a change, because some people may think, well, maybe she's just trying to manipulate me, or what does she want from me, right? I mean, when we're in a relationship gets to that craziness, there's we often don't think the best of each other, and we may think there's ulterior motives. So the key is consistency. If you're going to start practicing these things, you need to do it consistently. It's not a one-time deal, and that's some of the and that's some of the complaints that people say. They say, well, I said that one time. I was nice to her one day, or I was polite to her for a week, and then she started acting like this again, right? Folks, it's not a one-time deal. This is not, this is not something where you do something one time and then everything's supposed to be just perfect after that. It's like growing a flower, right? A plant. You don't just water it one time and think it's just going to start growing like crazy, right? It's work, right? Both partners have to put the effort to the relationship, and it's a daily effort. Okay. Now, do I mean literally daily? I just mean you have to be aware to put your best foot forward. Now, would you have to work as hard? Some days you may not have to work as hard as other days. If your partner's in a bad mood one day, that day you probably have to work a little harder, right? Or vice versa. If you're having a bad day, your partner's going to have to give grace to you and be understanding and know that it's not forever. It's a temporary thing that you're going through, and that you'll get over it. But in general, the mindset needs to be every day. You always put your best foot forward every single day, regardless how you feel or how your partner is behaving. But the change needs to be consistent. It cannot just be a one-time thing, and you think that's it. That should just give you carte blanche to just be whoever you want after that, and doesn't not have to put forth the effort anymore. In a relationship, it doesn't work that way. You need to consistently put your best foot forward and practice these things that we just talked about. And that will go a long way to, if you had relationship issues, that may actually be the one that may be a game changer. I have to tell people, if your partner doesn't go to counseling, you should still go. And the reason, and this is why, it's because when you go, and if you actually care, this is if you really do want to, if you do care about the relationship, you do want to improve the relationship, right? If it's not beyond repair and you still feel there's hope that you want to have this relationship improve, then you go yourself to counseling. and learn everything you can and be the best person that you can, because oftentimes you might also, I mean, we always say, yeah, the other person's got issues and they're narcissistic and they're toxic and they need counseling. But if you're in the relationship with that person, you also have issues that that you may need to work out as well. Oftentimes, as a matter of fact, if we are in toxic relationships, one or both partners are codependent. So those codependency issues, because normal people don't get involved. Well, normal people um, will not find themselves, or entertain unnormal or destructive toxic relationships. So if we allow this kind of behavior and have the gradual process come where we've allowed our relationship to become to this point, I believe there's probably issues that we ourselves need to work out as well. The counselor will help you, a trained professional counselor will help you work through your issues. Why is it that, it's taking you this long to finally address the issues, right? Um, how, there's there's usually two people that it takes two people to make or break a relationship. And so now I'm not saying 100% that just because if you were to address this, that your relationship may turn around. No one can guarantee that. But the most important thing is if you get help for yourself, at least you'll become healthier, right? This is very important. Um, of course, the goal is for the relationship to improve and heal, but ultimately we don't have control over somebody else, right? So even if you work on yourself and you're not seeing, and it doesn't seem to impact your partner, and your partner doesn't seem to want to change or react positively, or the worst case, he doesn't change at all, then what do you do, right? But at least you've gotten help for yourself. At least hopefully by that time you've been working on yourself, you're becoming more healthier, stronger, and no longer will have a codependency issue for future relationships. But at least you can say you did your best. I've sometimes I hear people say, well, I wish I wish I didn't leave that quickly, or, maybe I should have given it some more time. Maybe I didn't try my hardest. If you do your best, folks, you will never have regrets. The regrets comes is when you act out of anger. You're impatient. You just, I always say, don't make decisions. And you've heard it said too, don't make decisions under anger. You've got to calm down. Both parties, it's not the time to be making some serious decisions when you're upset. Okay, certainly not end a relationship when you're upset. That's not the time. Now, I know people do get upset. They say mean things to each other, like, I want a divorce, or I don't, I mean, all those kind of unpleasant things. But just keep in mind when you're both are upset, or one or both of you are upset, that's not the time to make life-changing kind of decisions. You need to let things cool off, give it some time, give it a few days or a week or however long it takes to process what's just happened before you make a major life-changing decision, so there are no regrets in the future. So that's why it's important, as I was saying before, why I'm talking about this, is that there's no regrets if you do your best. At least you can say you've tried your best to try to mend the relationship. And we don't have control over our partners. If our partners do not react in the way that we're hoping, and they still want to be ugly and toxic, and they want to, or worst case, they want to end the relationship, you've tried everything that you can at that point, and you can just pat yourself on the back and know that you've done your best. And at that point, if your partner is still not willing to work things out, then let that partner go. You can't force people to do things that they don't want to be there, right? And you would have to heal and grieve the loss. But the good news is that hopefully you'll be in a much happier place and a healthier place, so that when you do have a future relationship, when you do go out and try to find another relationship, it will be much different than the one you have right now, or the one that you had, I should say. But I believe there's hope, though. I really do believe that, if one person makes a change, it does positively impact the other person and the whole relationship. And people have heard me say, nothing ever stays the same. People always change. We are always evolving. We're always changing. And as a result, the relationship has to evolve and change with us, right? We're not the same person we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So it's the relationship is always in a constant state of change. So hopefully, if we practice these things, our relationship will improve and we can avoid having this lazy craziness thing happen to us. Okay, so I hope this video has been helpful. If those of you if you have any questions or comments, please put that in the comments section. If you like this video, please click like and share. And subscribe to my channel. This way you can be notified of all my future videos that come up. And until next time, thank you for watching. And I hope we all can have happy relationships and avoid that laziness, craziness. Okay, thank you. And I'll be making a video, another one soon. Okay, bye.